got the love of the entire nation behind you. I can't begin to tell you how much I feel. It's unbelievable.
Noel Gallagher talks to Kirsty Young on Desert Island Discs on Sunday morning at 11:15 here on BBC Radio 4.
BBC News at 10 o'clock. Iran and 6 major world powers, including Britain, have reached a deal on limiting the country's nuclear program after more than a decade of on-off negotiations. Details have still to be confirmed, but Western diplomats said that under the agreement, some international sanctions could be reinstated within 65 days if Tehran breaches its commitments. Speaking outside the talks in Vienna, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Yukiya Amano, confirmed that an agreement had been reached.
I have just signed the roadmap between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the IAEA for the clarification of past and present outstanding issues regarding Iran's nuclear program. This is a significant step forward towards clarifying outstanding issues regarding Iran's nuclear program.
The former Labour Foreign Secretary Jack Straw, who's pressed for improved relations between Iran and the West, said the deal in Vienna could herald a new dawn. But the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has described it as a mistake of historic proportions. Inflation, as measured by the Consumer Price Index, slipped back to zero last month, down from 0.1% in May. Lower food prices and discounts on summer clothing were a major factor in the falling rate for June. The Governor of the Bank of England, Mark Carney, said he expects prices to start rising during the year. There's been an angry response from some Conservatives after SNP MPs revealed that they plan to join Labour in voting against easing the fox hunting ban in England and Wales. Senior Tory backbencher Sir Peter Bottomley said that by voting on a law that didn't affect Scotland, the SNP risked making themselves look foolish and unprincipled. The former England manager Fabio Capello has been sacked as the coach of the Russian football team. His contract had been due to last until 2018, when Russia hosts the World Cup. Officials say he's leaving by mutual agreement. BBC News.
We hear how the nightshade group of plants has influenced human culture in Natural Histories at 11. But now on Radio 4, it's time for Woman's Hour with Jane Garvey.
Good morning. We'll talk to Sarah Khan of Inspire, one of our Woman's Hour panellists at the moment. Also on the programme today, she is the boss, Angela Merkel. Could Europe survive without her? Actually, it's just about unthinkable. Europe without Angela, can you imagine? But it might happen, perhaps in the next couple of years. Also today, research says the British are surprisingly satisfied with the quality of their family life. Why are we so satisfied? I didn't say happy, I just said satisfied. What do you think about that? Get in touch on Twitter at BBC Women's Hour or email the programme via our website. The 91-year-old and quite brilliant photographer Dorothy Bond is with us as well today. And you can hear from the Clares, big and little. They work at the NatWest Bank in Huddersfield. In fact, they don't just work there, they run it. And they are the stars of the BBC Two documentary series, The Bank, A Matter of Life and Debt. If you haven't seen it, it's still available on the iPlayer, and it really is eye-opening, that series. Have a look. First then to Sarah Khan, who was number 10 on this year's Women's Hour Power List. Now she's in her 30s, she grew up in Bradford, and she's the director and co-founder of Inspire. It was set up in 2009. Sarah, just for anyone who doesn't know, what is Inspire? What made you set it up?
In a nutshell, Inspire is a counter-extremism and women's rights organisation, and I helped set it up because after having spent around 20 years working within Muslim communities, there were two large elephants in the room that really frustrated me. One was the fact that there were very few Muslim organisations genuinely attempting to address the issue of gender inequality within Muslim communities, and I wasn't seeing a lot of progression in terms of women's rights within Muslim communities. And the second concern for me was actually where I was seeing more and more young Muslims being attracted to extremist ideologies and interpretations of Islam. And so we set up Inspire to address both those issues and to advocate and to champion human rights and fundamental freedom.
Just take us back to what was going on at the time you set up the organisation. You were also very young at the time, weren't you?
Yes, I was. I mean, it more or less started after the London bombings in 2005, and after that I sat on the Home Office's Tackling Extremism and Radicalisation working group.
Can I just ask, why did you sit on it? Why did they find you?
Honestly, I can't quite remember. I think it's probably because I had spent about 20 years in that time working within Muslim communities. I'd worked with lots of mainstream Muslim organisations in that time. I'd sat in leadership positions on many of those mainstream Muslim organisations. So it was probably for that reason, actually.
Okay. And you say counter-extremism and women's rights. The two are linked, aren't
Yes, we fundamentally believe they are, and the reason why I say that is because, in particular with regards to Islamist extremism, it's very clear from history, it's very clear from research that whenever Islamist extremists come into power, one of the first things they always do is curtail women's rights. Categorically, they will always do that. So we always find that women's rights is the key battleground from Islamist extremists. So we knew that by challenging extremism, by default, we will be defending women's rights.
What about your own background then? What went on in your home in Bradford?
I grew up in Bradford, and I mean my parents actually were both quite different people, but quite interesting. My mother, I think I would describe her as a feminist. And I remember as a 6-year-old and a 7-year-old child how she would attend local Pakistani women's activist groups, and I think that kind of activism definitely rubbed off on me. And my father, who was in some sense was quite conservative, he had an arranged marriage with my mother. He was actually also, I would describe as a feminist in the sense that he encouraged particularly his daughters to be independent, have an education, and to make a contribution to British life generally. So that was very much, I think, the background that I grew up in.
Now, of course, we're talking about family life and the beauty and quality of it a little bit later. That was your family and the way you operated. What about the people you lived amongst? There must have been differences.
Oh, absolutely. And I had a lot of friends who grew up in very conservative families where girls were not allowed to travel on their own without a male relative. I grew up where I knew cases of women who weren't allowed to even leave their homes because their mother-in-law or husband would not give them permission. A lot of those kind of cases, and it was those cases I think that really just shocked me, and even now to this day I still hear cases of women who, and they come from women themselves but also from other statutory partners who tell me that we're trying to engage with Muslim women, and a lot of women aren't allowed to attend parents' meetings, again because of very conservative patriarchal families and communities. I think those stories that I'd heard in the last 20 years or so will really again motivate me to do this work.
And those sorts of attitudes continue to be unquestioned by the wider community because of some sort of cultural squeamishness. What would you say about that?
I think to a certain degree that's true. I think a lot of people, when I speak to a certain number of people, they say, we know that there's a problem there, but we fear that by talking about it, we're going to create anti-Muslim prejudice. We fear the far right are going to exploit that to further anti-Muslim prejudice views. And so there's this kind of dilemma around that. But again, for me, I kind of came to the realisation, well, that's just not a good enough excuse. We've got to champion issues around women's rights, gender equality, and by doing that, we will be breaking the myths and the arguments of the far right themselves.
Well, let's talk about Inspire then. Who funds you?
Oh, gosh. Well, to be totally honest, we've been an organisation that's struggled with funding for a very, very long time.
So you're not given a chunk of money by the government? I mean, that would be what some cynics might believe.
I wish. We have. In the past, I can tell you where we've had funding from. We've done a lot of partnership with local authorities. We've had funding from there.
Well, that is essentially government money.
Yes, that is, absolutely. We've had a lot of funding coming through partnership work, essentially, but also from the British public, come onto our website and pay us. But when we've tried to apply for funding from foundations and charities, the main problem we've had is people saying, look, we don't want to fund your work because we're scared that we may be accused of being Islamophobic. So I remember for about 3 years in a row I didn't have a single salary, and I was doing what I was doing just because it was something I genuinely passionately cared about, and it was my own funding. But only recently now we've had some foundations who have recognised the importance of our work and are helping us to try and have core funding. But Jane, we don't even have an office at the moment because we don't have that funding.
I just want to nail the idea then that you're kind of some sort of government stooge.
That is something that's been thrown at us regularly, in particular by Muslims who oppose our work in challenging extremism and countering women's rights. Well, I completely oppose that. We clearly state on our website that we're a non-governmental organisation. Do we support the government to prevent agenda? Absolutely we support it. We don't make any qualms about that. But the idea that I'm a government stooge, it goes against everything that I've done. I've set up this organisation because precisely of what I believe in. It's my own organisation.
And I should say, you set it up at some cost to yourself. You do attract criticism, and the work you do attracts criticism too, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and I think I always knew that was going to be the case because we're probably challenging the two most controversial areas of work.